What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty P here with another episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. Hope you're enjoying your summer over there in the US. For those of you internationally, hope you're enjoying whatever season you've got. But I know we're getting into the summertime in the US and everyone's kind of loving that. But it's also a bit quiet on the Steelers front. A little bit quiet on the Steelers front. We've actually put a poll out on the website in terms of content that you want to receive up until now, until training camp and through the off season. For those of you that are subs, please go and have a look at that poll on the community post tab. If you're not a sub, hit that sub button. Then you're going to come up with all the different places you can vote on that. Keen to put out a couple more of these. This is really going to help us make sure we give you the content you're looking for, because there's a lot of Steelers podcasts out there. We want to give you something different. We also want to follow and give you things that we think are interesting as well. All right, we are talking Pittsburgh Steelers 6th-round draft pick Logan Lee out of Iowa today. He's a guy that I like the potential of. He's not someone we've had a chance to really deeply talk about. So I thought I'd just do a bit of a quick snap sort of video on Logan Lee. There's a little bit on my mind in terms of the Steelers defensive line. There's a lot of chat about Cam Hayward's contract. There's a lot of chat about Ogunjobi. I mean, if Ogunjobi didn't have such a high dead cap penalty here, he probably would have been moved on potentially. Maybe not probably, but quite likely, I think, that he'd be a cut candidate. But they can't really afford to replace him. He still has potential. It's just that his performance doesn't justify his pay packet. And so if you believe that about Cam Hayward, then you should be more on that train from an Ogunjobi perspective. But then obviously Benton, it's a really important year for Benton. His second year, there's a lot of hype around him. They brought in Dean Lowry, who I think is a really good player. I think he's better than Chris Wormley was in terms of the impact he can make. So look out there. For Hoko, someone is probably the only true nose tackle on this team. Is someone that we could see a bit more of as well. And so that's exciting because we only really saw him on the practice squad last year. I fundamentally believe, as a video that I did about a couple of months back, that Fehoko was needed to work on some things that the Steelers wanted to see. That's why they brought him back. So there's a lot of confusion around, he didn't play last year. Why would you bring him back? I think he worked on some things. And I think you've heard his name a lot more at mandatory minicamp, heard a lot during the OTAs as well. That's a good sign for Fehoko. But back to Logan Lee, the Steelers 2024 6th-round pick, 178th overall. What does he bring to the team? What does he bring to the mix? How can he fit into this lineup? Particularly given he is someone that can play more, a bit on the interior, a bit more outside over the B gap, C gap, not so much lining up over the tackle necessarily, which was what we've seen from DeMarvin Leal. And that versatility from Leal, we didn't have a great year out of Leal last year. It was really flat. It was sad because the year before we were really high on what his second year could be. And now he's come to this point, and he looks like a cut candidate. That being said, you did see a bit of mention of him through the end of OTAs and mandatory minicamp, particularly from Kyle Dunbar. So you never know, but it's very, very difficult to have confidence in DeMarvin Leal. So where does Logan Lee fit into this interesting mix in the defensive line? So I thought we'd start off with just a couple of baseline level stats. Now, Logan Lee came out of college with 18.5 tackles for a loss. I almost said tackles. That's going to persist with me for the rest of my podcasting time. 9 sacks. He had 58 solo tackles, 100 assisted tackles, 158 tackles overall. This is according to Sports Reference. This is Pro Football Reference's college page. And he had 7 pass defenses, 2 fumble recoveries, no forced fumbles. 9 sacks doesn't seem like a lot, but that's actually pretty decent at a college level. Particularly in the way some of that's structured, the rotation in and out, the bigger rosters, etc. He wasn't Iowa, obviously, like a pretty top deep. They try and play a top defense out there. But 18.5 tackles for loss is nothing to shy away from. It's a minimum of 5 tackles for loss for him over each year of his college career. He only had 2 games in 2020, and that was COVID year. So whether you want to count that, I think he's effectively played 3 years of college, really. And 9 sacks, that's 3 an average a year as well. So that's really, really good things from Logan Lee. And from that perspective. Now, one thing to note about Logan Lee is they did sort of mention the fact that he had played not so much just the interior. So I'm not going to go through the stats on PFF because I don't trust their sack stats. Like they have him at 1 less sack. They have him different tackle count. All the rest of it. So I'm not going to go into that because I trust their college stats less than I do their NFL stats. And a lot of Steel fans, we know that their NFL stats to get Myles Garrett the DPOY award is absolute crap. But they do have the only stats that we can reliably pull on snaps, and usually they're not too bad on these snaps. So we're just going to look at these as a trend rather than like the specific number. But he played 1,854 snaps, according, and Sports Reference don't track this, unfortunately, for college. But he had 1,854 snaps. He lined up 289 times over the A gap, so that nose tackle, and 1,499 times over the B gap. He only lined up over the tackle 61 times and outside 5 times. Now, I might pull up DeMarvin Leal because you'll see the difference here. He's not a DeMarvin Leal type, but he also is not really a Benton type either. He's kind of between the two. Like if you line them up 1, 2, 3, Logan Lee's kind of in this middle part. But if we go to Benton's numbers, Benton lined up in college over the A gap 700 times and over the B gap 611 times. Now, Benton is not a true nose tackle in a 3-4 either. He would be interior in a 4-3, but he's more of a 3-4 defense. He's plucked out of Wisconsin. He's a particular type of player. We know the lineage and the linkages between the Steelers and the defense, particularly the defensive line and linebackers at Wisconsin. So Keanu Benton is going to be more of an interior on a 3-4, whereas Logan Lee is going to be a little bit more on the outside. But he's not going to be this sort of like almost like he's not a full 5 technique. He's not a guy that's going to be, in a 4-3 or sub package scheme on the outside that can almost play outside linebacker, but he's too big. That's Leal. But that's not Logan Lee. So that's kind of one of the key differences. But that being said, and this probably tells a better story for Benton in some ways than what it looks like on paper. Benton had 19 tackles for a loss. Remember, Logan Lee had 18.5. And he had 9 sacks as well, only 4 pass defense. He had 2 fumble recoveries. He had 1 forced fumble. Tackles was 80, which is about half the 158. Well, it's almost dead half 158 that Logan Lee had. Now, you'd expect Logan Lee to have a few more tackles on the outside stopping that run. You'd probably expect him to have more tackles for a loss. But like also Benton on this is off over 4 years. He only played 4 games in 2020, but he did play 13 games, in 2019. So Benton has played a lot more games and actually been on the field longer than Logan Lee. So that's the other thing to take into account. But you'd expect Logan Lee probably to have a decent sack number that would be exactly the same as Benton or more, given he has played less games, given he does play more on the outside. And that is what is the case. And more what I want to do is not compare stat for stat because they're slightly different defensive linemen, although I think they're both versatile. I think you could build up Logan Lee. I think you could use him on certain sub packages more inside if you want a quicker pass rusher. I also think Benton needs to play a little bit more more outside of the gaps than what he's been played in his rookie year. They've used him far too much on the interior there, but particularly more like sometimes, in a nose tackle position. But the point being is that Benton has adjusted well to the NFL from a good college, and so could Logan Lee. They also play in the same conference. So that's it. That's another thing as well. I might bring up DeMarvin Leal, seeing as we are talking about the difference in the gaps there, because there's probably someone that's going to ask me that question in the comments. So let me bring that up. But as I said, it is interesting when you look at this because the Steelers play a very interesting style of defense. They play the traditional 3-4, but then they play a lot of sub package. So how players fit into the mix can be pretty interesting. Okay, so here you've got DeMarvin Leal. Over the course of his college career, only 77 snaps in the A gap, 249 in the B gap, over the tackle, 219, and then he played outside at over 1,000 snaps. So yeah, we're talking chalk and cheese with Leal to these guys. And so Lee's probably a better natural fit overall for the Steelers than their defensive line. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Steelers leverage him, how they adjust. It's recorded that he came out at like 291 pounds, 6'5". So will they ask him to stack on a bit more? Maybe, but you also want him to be able to play pretty quick because they give you something a little bit different than everyone else. But this is why I like that they've drafted him after getting Dean Lowry, because Lowry could be a really good, case example for Logan Lee. Not that Hayward and Ogunjobi can't as professionals on the line. Lee might be closer to a Lowry than he is anyone else currently on the Steelers defensive line roster. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about Dean Lowry? Not Dean Lowry. I've done a video on him before. What do you think about Logan Lee? Excited for this guy, 74 from Iowa, out of Iowa, now playing on the Pittsburgh Steelers. His favorite animal is a tiger, according to a video on the website that I just saw in the last 24 hours. But yeah, let me know in the comments about Logan Lee. I'm excited for him. I think he can make the 53. Well, he's definitely getting on the practice squad, but I think he'll make the 53. I don't think they want to let this guy go through waivers. And I'm excited for what this guy could potentially do, even on for minimal number of snaps in 2020.